Barbara. We are going to be looking at some exercises today that will strengthen the muscles of your hips. Just taking a few short minutes each day from wherever you are, you can do a great job at strengthening your glutes, your hip flexors, your hamstrings, and all of the supporting infrastructure. We're going to be lying on our side. You want to have your head in line with your spine. I'm using a block for this, but you could also use your bottom arm or a squishy pillow. All of the variations today will have your knees bent with your hips, shoulders, and knees stacked. Although no props are needed, you can, if you want to, use a resistance band like I am, tied around your knees, but you can also do this au naturel. You're gonna have a little lift in your bottom waistline, lift your feet off the mat, and do your elevated clamshell by opening your top knee up and closing. Open and close. So it's just a slight variation on the regular clamshell. Having the feet lifted like this gives you a little extra work for your bottom leg. You want to watch that the lower waist doesn't collapse into the mat, and you don't want to necessarily open to your maximum range. You want to keep your hips facing straight ahead and your pelvis stable. You're going to do about 10, maybe 15 repetitions of each of the variations we're going to look at today. Always thinking about keeping your pelvis and hips stable as you mobilize the leg in your hip joint. I think that's around 10 or 15. So we're going to close the knees, bring the feet back down. Variation number 2 takes your top leg and lifts it to about hip height. From there, you're going to lift it up a bit and take it back down. Again, we're keeping the knee bent, and we're seeking a more or less parallel movement of our leg here. I'm keeping my top hand on my hip just to remind me about my range and also to lengthen my waist, but you could also have your top hand on your mat. This variation works a slightly different set of muscles than the clamshell version, and you might be feeling them a little bit differently as well. Likewise, you're not going for your maximum range for this because we don't want to start getting the spine involved, but you just want to kind of feel like you're fighting against gravity, or as though someone was putting their hands on your thigh and you're working against that resistance. Again, if you're using a resistance band, you might be just getting that from the band itself. Go for 3 more, and 2, and last one. The next one starts with our legs at hip height. Again, the knee stays bent the whole time. It's our internal clamshell, so our reverse clamshell, where we internally rotate at the hip, bringing the knees together and the feet apart. So now we're working the internal rotators of the hip as opposed to the regular clamshell, which worked the external rotators. Again, it'll probably feel quite differently for you on each of these variations. Tempting to get the lower waistline involved, or for the pelvis to roll forward as the knee comes forward. You want to do your best to keep the hips and pelvis really still, and of course no tension in your neck or shoulder area. Just working against gravity as you lift up and resisting the gravitational pull as you come down. Let's maybe do 3 more of these. I'm already getting really toasty in my hips, so hopefully you are as well. Our next variation is a classic kick. So again, we start with the leg at about hip height, the knee stays bent, and you're just going to swing the thigh forward and then hinge from the hip to take it back. I say the thigh, even though the entire leg is moving, just so that we're focusing on the action coming from that thigh bone in your hip joint. The knee may want to help out, and so you're just going to have to tell it it doesn't need to do any work right now other than stay stable. Because these variations all have a bent knee, you may be feeling a little more hamstring work than if you were doing this with a straight leg, and that is fine. For this variation, we're working our hip flexors as we come forward, and our hip extensors, so our glutes and hamstrings, as we extend the leg back. You want to think about sticking your bum out as you hinge forward, and avoiding arching your low back as you extend back. So again, not necessarily seeking a huge range here. You want pelvic stability first and foremost. Couple more. And then our 5th and final variation involves that hinge backwards. So again, the knee stays bent, the leg extends back behind you. If you were to look down towards your thigh, you probably wouldn't be able to see it. Pull your stomach in, you're going to need that pelvic stability here, and now you're going to press up. So your leg is kicked back behind you and you're lifting and lowering from here. Similar to the earlier variation, but you've now got hip extension happening. So you'll be feeling more of your glute max, so the muscle that wraps around your bum, but you'll also be feeling some of the supporting musculature as well. So as I said, these five variations can be done from wherever you happen to be. They don't take very long. About 10 or 15 of each is all you need to do. You could always supercharge it by doing a couple of sets of each. But with these, you're pretty much tackling as many muscles of your hip as we can possibly do. You can always add a couple of little pulses at the end, just for good luck. And let's rest it there. Bring the legs back in. Don't forget to do your other side. Hope you enjoy.